Fostering clarity of thought. In the short time, I tried to explain a little bit about my obsessions. In 1992, I graduated from art school. So since 18 years, I'm working in the field of art. And it's still excited. Also because the first principles which I set to myself, I'm still trying to maintain them. And the first work I made on the art school, which I considered as an autonomous work, was in the 3rd year. And the problem, if you go to art school, you can practice your technical skills, and that's a way to approach it. But basically, nobody can teach you art. Nobody can teach you to discover your identity. And for me, my first work, it was a kind of inner necessity. And I began to lock myself for 36 hours in a dark room. I called it visual cleaning. And it was not because I was depressed, but it was a kind of inner necessity, as I said, and to keep my mind clear. And the first time I did it, I slept a little bit, and I eat a little bit. And when I came out, I felt very good. I had an expression to reality, and I said, this is something I'm going to maintain for the rest of my career. I also said to myself, it's not so easy for an artist to live up to believe 5 years in your work. It only becomes interesting when you believe in your art for 20 or 30, or maybe for the rest of your life. Then 2 years later, I made this work, and this is actually my first visual work, and it's like, it's my artist statement, and it's me, I'm standing in the woods, and I have a wooden box covered with mirrors, and you see a reflection of the trees. Of course, the trees are very important, because if it would reflect destroyed buildings, or if it would candy, then I would be a totally different artist. And if you watch the image very well, you also see that it's first blossom. And for me, that was like an extension of the visual cleaning, but in the shape of a photo. The title of the work is Bonnet, and when the piece was sold, it was only one photo. I also, the head, the mirror head, I also give it to the collector. So it was just one work, one ritual. Then this work, Running Shadow, this is 10 years later, and occasionally I start to lock myself, and it was like, you could call it meditation or training. And then I made a sculpture to share it with the public. And this is basically a metal box with roll-down shutters. And the shutters go up and down. And people can go in, and the shutters go down for 2 minutes. It's totally dark. And they have an idea of, it's just one brief moment. But for me, it was very important to maintain my idea. Another obsession I have is the idea of reality. This is a work from 1994. I really like this work. And this is, you see children, they're wearing hats. And those hats, well, I was 5 years on the academy, and I collected all the papers I wrote down at the lectures. And when I graduated, I collected all those papers, and it was a bag of paper. And then first I made a suit of it, but then it didn't work. And then I made hats of it. And then I went back to my primary school in Spakenburg. I come from a small village. And then I said to the teachers, the idea has to go back, my thought has to go back to the world. So then I went to the school, and on the last day, before the summer holiday, the kids walk away with my thoughts. So for me, the idea of letting loose of my ideas was a kind of, I really enjoyed this work. This is a work from 1995, and this is an exhibition also in Amsterdam. And these are doors of glass. And the only thing I did with the exhibition, like a Vicks rub, if you're having a cold, I don't know, and then you put Vicks, and then it's with eucalyptus, and it refreshes. So I put Vicks on the door, and when people entering the space, they got a kind of, well, they couldn't see the reality, and they had a kind of a small refreshment. On the walls, this is how I do it. On one of the walls of the museum, it was like a big space. The space was totally empty. I just put a small poem, and I also mixed it with Vicks. This is a piece in a museum, and this is also with, it's a green floor of Vilt, and there is a performer, and she's writing with Fresh Up. It's a kind of aftershave for old men, which my father was always using. So if I smell that aftershave, it's called Fresh Up, I really have a much stronger memory from my father than when I see an image. And in this performance, the woman writes poetry, and because there's a lot of alcohol, the text will evaporate into the people's minds. This is a piece, The World Is My Oyster, and it took me 2 years to convince the gallerist, because it was a gallery and they had no windows, only two doors. And I said to him, we have to make a hole in the wall the size of a soccer goal, and because behind there is a beautiful garden, and it's just reality. And so yeah, somebody has to pay it, and I didn't want to make a picture about it, but eventually I could convince him, and this is the process. And this was the final work. So when people came in the exhibition, they thought, is this a painting or is this a photo? And then the whole story was, well, I just took something away, and I didn't change anything about reality, but people thought, hey, what's happening with reality? And for me, this was like a kind of, this was a kind of epiphanic moment, because also, if you see it looks like a 17th century painting. And so for me, that was, I never was so close to reality. This is a piece I did in 1999, and this is like, I was living in New York then, and I had a kind of hard time. And these are, I was a kind of depressed then, because all my ideas, because of the big city, for some reason it didn't work anymore. So I had to, the visual cleaning didn't work. So this was a kind of, it's just 2 dog ears, and they were sewed by the doctor into my face just for 2 minutes. And then we made a photo, and that was the work. This is a piece, Formula 1, and it's my only work in Holland, in public space. It's very difficult to make a public work for me. And the work consists of, can we see something? Because under the water surface, we had a metal frame, 10 centimeters, and on the metal frame, we have plastic tubes with small holes, and we made a text of it. Then there is a blower on the shore, and every 5 minutes, the blower starts to run, and then the text comes out of the water. So after, when the blower stops, the text is gone. So it's like a poem which recited over and over again. And people are, because people are not used to wait 5 minutes, so many people never saw the piece because they have to wait. So it's not there, it's there. This is an extension of The World Is My Oyster, because when I made that, when I made a hole in the wall, I got 3 invitations in Europe to make holes in museum walls too. But I didn't want to do that because I knew the gallerist. It was 2 years complaining, and that was part of the work. But I really like the idea that you take something away, don't change anything about reality, and you have a different view. And this piece is called The Real Fiction Cinema, and I was still in New York then, and I had a kind of strange experience because, well, in Holland there's so much American television. So the first time when I went to New York, after a couple of days, well, you know all the images from TV series, from movies. But if you stay longer there, so I lived 5 years, and at a certain point I began to understand that those images are not mine, it's just totally artificial. And this piece translates that a little bit. So the inside is like a cinema, and I have cinema music, but what you see is just reality. And this piece is traveling around the world. It was in many locations. This was in Leeds. So, but for some reason, of course, you know it's reality, but people are so conditioned. You see chairs, the carpet, the music. So sometimes you got confused. And sometimes the music with what happened outside really works together. Sometimes people think, was it on purpose? So that's kind of, it's reality, but a little bit different. So this was and now the 26th of August, we're starting in Basel, because there is a Swiss curator, Klaus Littmann, and he built 3 cinemas, and he's gonna start all over the world. So basically, I'm looking for the locations, and he's doing all the work. And it's like, it's like a military operation. This is a big stamp, and so the stamp, we put it in with Vicks, and then I put it on the wall. This was actually a piece before the opening, because it was 1 stamp, and I had 10 prints, and they were all sold before the opening. And after opening, all the collectors came with canvas or paper, and then you say, can you print it on the canvas? I said, no, that's not the idea. I come to your house or to the museum, and then we print it directly on the wall with people, and not with paint, but with Vicks. And then I only sold 4. But I can. It's better now. This is better. Now, actually, the piece is now sold. It's now sold by a museum, so it is good anyway. But they only can print it directly on the wall. It's a small, but for me, a big difference, because then, well, there's a big discussion between you have reality and you have representation of reality, and that's a big difference. And if you really understand that, for me, that's a big issue. A painting, for example, is always a representation of reality. So for me, it's like, it's a different mentality. This is a public sculpture which is now on the Hudson in New York. And this is like a billboard. This is the sketch. This is the model. Most of the time I make models to convince people. And this is the real one. And I think 4 weeks ago I installed it in New York, but we didn't have a permit because it's connected to the Hudson. And then the city, they didn't give us the permit. So for the moment it's not working. So, so to make things in reality is a big struggle. Eventually it will work, but now we have to fill in the papers and that kind of... but this is more like... so it's connected to the river. So I will show you. So in one leg, so the water is sucked from the Hudson. So in one leg it goes up. Then you have a water-off curtain. And then in the other leg it goes back. That's also the idea of like the connecting with the river with the idea of eternity. On the 1st of February 2006, I made a kind of important statement to myself by saying to myself, from now on, I'm going to read every day 45 minutes out loud on tape, and only one side of a cassette tape. And in the first 4 or 5 books was very difficult, but at a certain point, it was a kind of meditation, and it was like growing. So here you see, so some books have 20 tapes, some books have 18 tapes, and for me it was very important that Well, normally, if I would have to read a very thick book, it would be like an effort. But now I switched it around, because it doesn't matter if it's a thick book or a thin book. I only read 45 minutes. So for me, that was a kind of revealing experience. Also that it's a work without effort. Because if you see the image now, you think, if you have to read this in 1 week, then it's a lot of work. But if you only read 45 minutes, then it becomes a different approach. And for me, these things to discover in my own work, yeah, that's a kind of, that's a very interesting process. Well, I remember when I was in New York, I stayed there for 5 years, and when I showed my work, they're saying all the time, like, there is no business in your work. You have to change your attitude. But maybe when I was 18, but I was too old. And for what reason? Because the whole thing is that, like, to make the connection with your intellectual development and the works is a kind of alibi. That's the whole process. And with this work, I try to implant it in Dutch society, because now we're making a small pilot with the Dutch government with 10 people, and in Holland we have community service. So if you got drunk in your car, you have to do community service in an elderly house. And now we have 10 people, and instead of cleaning an elderly house as a punishment, they have to read a book of Dostoevsky out loud. And that's a kind of, I think that's a beautiful idea. I don't know if it works, but for me that's like a small step to make it happen in society. Well, that's basically a little bit my works about. That's it.